Regulation in the video game industry has been a hot button issue for the last couple of decades. We really can go back to the moment when lawmakers targeted violent video games and pushed the video game industry to self-regulate, thus the founding of the ESRB. But even then, we've had notorious incidents over the years, from the hot coffee GTA controversy to the
Didn't Mortal Kombat help start the ESRB? What was it? It was that Night Trap, wasn't it? Isn't that the game that really sparked it?
push around that time to regulate violent and inappropriate video games, an effort that at the time U.S. Senator Hillary Clinton
Hold on just a second.
took on.
Okay. For some reason, my keyboard wasn't pausing. I just did it again. Oh. Oh, you know what? You know what? I know what the problem is. But it's going to take too much time. I'm just going to have to roll with
Declaring
it.
the ESRB needed to be reformed and further federal oversight was needed. It's a never-ending war, and thus the need for the ESA, which basically represents all video game publishers, and their lobbyism efforts to stop video games from being scapegoated is the reason for all of societal problems. Every few years, months, weeks, and days, politicians target video games as the root cause for whatever tragedy recently occurred. So yeah, the ESA preventing these clowns from pushing unfounded legislation is needed, especially as study after study has shown that there are no links of violent video games to real-life violence. There have actually been studies finding that these games reduce aggression, but even then there have been issues on that ESA front, especially as the ESA blatantly ignored the psychological link of gambling to loot boxes. That was a topic that we talked extensively about on this channel, and there were legislative
Oh yeah, that needs to be fixed. Definitely. I don't know how we still have like microtransactions and stuff like that. Not exactly gambling, but it works on the same dumb monkey brain function.
efforts push to stop the spread of that manipulative monetization, which still exists and largely has been normalized in sports and mobile games. It's a territory I always felt a bit uncomfortable on, as letting the government intervene always comes with negative future outcomes and the possibility of censorship, which is indeed something that we have seen in other countries. And this is actually an example just from the other day. UK counterterrorism unit demands Steam withdraw a controversial shooter from sale. We've received a request from authorities in the UK to block the game and have applied such country restrictions, which the content of the actual game, that's not really the issue. This is something that's
What a bunch of pussies. I wouldn't go to the UK anyway.
been on Steam for a couple of years, but because it mirrors some of the real life stuff going on, like with the Israel conflict, it becomes an enemy of, well, certain government groups like this. And that's why I'm just always uncomfortable about some of this regulation and some of these pushes to demand games like this stop, especially when you have like a Call of Duty campaign, which, let's be honest, some of these campaigns are arguably a lot worse than, you know, whatever this game was that came out a couple of years ago. And then we also, even in the US, we've had incidents like 6 Days in Fallujah. We talked about this earlier, I think it was last year or so, in which there was a massive push for all platforms to delist this game and get it banned because I guess it hurts many people's feelings about how it portrays the Iraq war. And yes, we saw advocacy groups calling for storefronts to drop 6 Days in Fallujah. Ultimately, that didn't happen, and it shouldn't have happened. But specifically with Valve, this is where we get to the main meat of this video, and it has to do with the push to...
The hell was that? Give me just a minute, I'll be right back. Something blew up at the... I don't know what the hell that was. Did that pick that up on the mic? That was crazy loud. And it was like right here, right next to me. I don't know what it was. It was outside. Anyway, I'll get back to the video. Shit.
regulate Steam and really the comments and some of the activities that are going on the platform. This is a push that we've seen in recent years. It started around the end of 2022. We have this PC Gamer article outlining exactly what happened. U.S. Senator asked Gabe Newell what Valve is doing to fight Nazis on Steam. Senator Maggie Hassan sent a letter to the Valve boss to express her concerns. U.S. Senator Maggie Hassan...
Bro, I keep hearing about these World War II villain people being on Steam, and it's just memes. Do we want to ban memes? No, we don't want to ban memes. Even if the people are serious, we want to know who these people are. We don't want to push them into the underground.
has sent a letter to Valve boss to express concerns about, that type of content on Steam and ask what Valve is doing to combat it, while all this, negative stuff in the world and other hateful sentiments shared on the platform. As the most popular and largest digital distribution platform for computer video games, including online community and communication features, Steam has tremendous domestic and global reach and is used by computer video game players of all ages. Valve should be taking steps to prevent harmful content, especially given the relationship between online comments and violence in the offline world. And again, I hate this perspective and how inaccurate it is to the real world. I mean, there's science that backs it up that says that there is no link. But unfortunately, like I said, there was an incident years ago in which a user, I think...
Even if there was a link, like, people are allowed to do whatever they want, man. It's just video games. They're cartoons.
Had a history on Steam, and because of that history, it was used against him, saying, oh my god, was his activities with these violent video games, is it the real reason why he did all this stuff? But it wasn't, and unfortunately, this is what happens. A lot of these politicians, a lot of these, media outlets, they're looking for an easy scapegoat, and video games is always the answer. Now, this report goes on to mention a couple of other incidents and stuff that's been going on, including some reports coming from the Anti-Defamation League. I also love that some of the examples of some of the no-no content they bring up is Hitler dating Sims. I find that so funny, and it's hard to take any of this seriously. But this mentions that Maggie Hassan, the U.S. senator at the time, said, opposing the spread of extremist and racist activities online should be something that we all can agree is important, and ensuring that online recreational spaces are safe and welcoming for everyone should be a top priority of video game makers and distributors, which, of course, that's the goal. And, of course, many of these publishers are going out of their way to do this stuff. She has Valve to respond to them by, early 2023, and I don't...
You can turn this on. You don't have to see those games. There are filters that you can turn on, and you don't have to see them. You don't have to worry about them. No, what they're worried about is they think that they're stealing the minds of children with their propaganda in their games. But if that's the case, doesn't the same happen with their side when they put in their propaganda? So, like... I don't know. They're just flinging bullshit. They just want control because control is control. It feels good to have power, I guess.
I don't believe they had all responded. And then PC Gamer gives their perspective, saying she's not wrong. Steam isn't the second coming of the Daily Stormer, but there's plenty of that type of adjacent content to be found in users, groups, and game titles. Some of it is clearly facetious, but that can be a tough line to draw, and that's the problem. Where do you draw the line? And many of these governments are going to go out of their way to go after any and everything that is problematic. And that's why I am very nervous about regulation and concerned and just not in support of it. Because most of the time, and you'll see it in many of these reports coming from these politicians, they don't have an actual plan for it.
Because they're stupid. They don't know anything about video games. They don't play video games. They probably don't even watch movies. Unless it's like My Fair Lady and stuff like that.
And that's why they just give this blanket, letter to these Valve bots said,
Titanic.
Do something about this. Make sure it's not a problem. And that's why with like Steam forums and, social media websites, that's why they struggle with this so extensively, because there's just so much activities on these platforms, and monitoring every single comment is something that it's just not going to happen. But that's an answer that they don't want to hear. But I bring up that report from 2022 because it's been recently revived by another US senator. This is an article coming from PC Gamer. Steam is an unsafe place for teens and young adults. US Senator warns Gabe Newell of more intense scrutiny from the government if Valve doesn't take action against this type of content.
Don't let your kids on Steam store. I mean, you don't have to let them on the Steam storefront. There are ways to have, like, your kids can use Steam without having their own whole PC. If Steam's bad, everything's bad. Steam, let me tell you, if your kid's got is on a PC, Steam is the least of your worries. So this is stupid. They're stupid. They're just going after it because they want to go after it because they think they can.
U.S. Senator Mark Warner comes less than a week after an ADL report accusing Steam of normalizing hate and that type of content in the gaming community. And this ADL report has so many issues, we're going to talk about it. But first off, this politician, Warner, he says, it has been brought to your attention before that this type of ideology seemed to find a home on Steam. In 2022, Valve received a Senate letter identifying nearly identical activity on your platform, and yet 2 years later, it appears that Valve has chosen to continue a hands-off type approach to content moderation that favors allowing some users to engage in sustained bouts of disturbing and violent rhetoric rather than ensure that all of its users can find a welcoming and safe environment across your platforms. And yes, he's referencing the 2022
What's worse, people using violent rhetoric or people pushing everything to the point that it pisses everyone off and they start using violent rhetoric? Because that's really what happens. People aren't violent just because, well, there are people that are just violent, but regular people, regular normal people aren't violent unless somebody makes them violent. And in this case, it's not real violence, it's like speech and like video graphics on the internet.
Senate letter referenced by Warner, written by U.S. Senator Maggie Hassan. Warner's letter is quite similar in that regard, acknowledging that Steam does have an online conduct policy and subscriber agreement, but questioning how committed Valve is to actually enforcing it. And it is important to note that Valve has been, they've been increasing their moderation. This started around 2018, in which they've been moderating Steam comments. And we've also seen further overhauls of the Steam community rules. They've been actually active with this type of stuff, but it goes against a narrative that the ADL is trying to spread. We'll get to that ADL report in a second. But we can get back to what Mark Warner is saying. He said, as of Black Friday and the holiday buying season approaches, the American public should know that not only is Steam an unsafe place for teens and young adults to purchase and play online games, my God, but also that absent a change in Valve's approach to user moderation and the type of behavior that it welcomes on its platform, Steam is playing a clear role in allowing harmful ideologies to spread and take root among the next generation. Warner also warned, somewhat ominously, that if Valve does not adopt industry standard moderation practices, whatever.
Oh, I hate industry standard. You know what industry standard is? That's like games like Dragon Age. It's those kinds of companies like BioWare, Bethesda. Those are industry standard. Slop. Industry standard is slop.
Whatever that means. And again, it's just this blanket, we're going to regulate you. It will face more intense scrutiny from the federal government for its complicity in allowing hate groups to congregate and engage in activities that undoubtedly puts Americans at risk. And that is his threat to Valve. And this is all coming about because of a recent report coming from the Anti-Defamation League. And again, PC Gamer has it. The Anti-Defamation League, a U.S. organization that aims to combat anti-Semitism and support Israel, has published a report alleging that Steam is rife with, all of that, and accusing Valve of allowing the spread of hateful and extremist material through a highly permissive approach to content policy. The ADL said its report is based on what is described as an unprecedented platform-wide analysis of public data on Steam, including more than 458 million user profiles, 152 million profile and user group avatar images, and 610 million user comments. And what they found was that Pepe the Frog and swastikas are the most common extremist symbols found on Steam.
Yeah, I saw a video not too long ago. It was literally saying that exact same thing. And that's just ridiculous.
55% of Pepe the Frog, which, look, if you're trying to, talk about how problematic Steam is, Pepe the Frog is not something that's going to win, and it's not going to win anything. That just makes people look at a report like this and just scoff at it. And yes, they found 55% and 9% of the swastikas of detected symbols. And again, none of this includes any context or anything along those lines because it doesn't matter. That's not what the ADL is trying.
Even when you look through it and actually see the context, because they show examples, and the examples are gross. A lot of them are gross, but who cares? It's just rage bait. That's why all these people are leaving X. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen.
They're not trying to give that context. The report says Steam's public-facing content policy includes no mention of hate or extremism, which isn't entirely accurate. Again, this is obvious. The Steamworks documentation specifically states that content with that type of speech that promotes hatred, violence, or discrimination against groups of people based on ethnicity, religion, gender, age, disability, or orientation should not be published on the platform. Steam's code of conduct does not make specific reference to any type of content, but does forbid harassment, disruptive, or damaging behavior, and the violation of the personal rights of other users. More on the points are questions about the application and effectiveness of Steam's moderation policies. The report says Steam appears to be technically capable of moderating content and has done so selectively in the past in reference to external pressure. One example would be the removal of Pepe the Frog emoticons, which I roll my eyes at that, from the Steam Marketplace following a DMCA takedown notice filed by Pepe creator Matt Fury, but its overall approach has been largely ad hoc, with Valve failing to systemically address the issue of extremism and that type of content on the platform. Valve updated its community rules in 2023, as I talked about a bit ago, to provide a much granular breakdown of what is and isn't allowed, but as noted at the time, the real question was how it would go about enforcing those rules. Now, the ADL report that's, being cited.
Who are these people that are like leaving comments on Steam and the Steam community? Are these real people? Do they actually exist? Like, who's using Steam like social media? That's crazy that's actually happening. I didn't know that was a thing.
By these U.S. politicians. I already talked about some of the issues that I have with it, but this is what they call it. It's Steam-powered hate, top gaming site rife with extremism and anti-Semitism. And they say to understand the scale and nature of hateful and that type of content on Steam, the ADL conducted an analysis of public data on Steam community on an unprecedented platform-wide scale. And yeah, their key findings is all the stuff I just mentioned beforehand. And look,
he really does look like Tech Wizard, doesn't he?
When you have the context of 458 million accounts or whatever, and you find 540,000 incidences that people use Pepe the Frog, that is the most problematic thing you found. I don't see the push for regulation making any sense in this regard. And that is what the ADL is pushing for here, especially since they keep on bringing up legislation and the US senators that have been raising concerns because of what they've been spreading. And look, in your report, if you're going to have comments made from 2017 before they even started to, actually moderate, a lot of this activity, again, you're losing the argument when you do stuff like this. Keyword detection is easy to evade, and they're showing a comment from July of fucking 2017. A user evades Steam's content detection system by adding spaces between each letter. And the ADL did have a similar...
I don't even care about it. If people are posting stuff like that, either block them or just harass them back. I don't get it. Because that's what I do to people on X whenever they harass me. Like, I just harass them back. And they can't beat me. And they won't, and they never do.
Similar report that came about earlier this year, Hate is No Game, Hate and Harassment Online Games 2023. Again, this was published in February of 2024, and they say that this type of behavior is now pervasive, that has become the norm for many players. It's been the norm for 20 or so years, but an estimated 83 million of the 110 million online multiplayer gamers in the US were exposed to hate and harassment over the last 6 months. And this blanket definition of hate and harassment, again, what do we define that as? And that's my issue with this, because negative comments online, you're going to get that every and anywhere you go. They say in an interview with a researcher from the ADL Center of Technology and Society, an adult gamer described how he responded to his son experiencing a painful incident of hate in an online multiplayer game. That's how it is, I try to teach them young because now he wants to be a gamer. I have to teach him how it goes. So, okay. And look, the video game industry has made massive efforts to change. We've seen efforts from multiple games in which they're changing. AI is trying to make Call of Duty Black Ops 6 less toxic, and it's working. Yes, voice chats and a lot of this activity has now been curbed because a lot of this moderation has become a hot topic focus because of, the possibility of regulation. That's always going to be one of those worries in the minds of many of these publishers. They have to show an actual effort to go after these types of activities, even though
I saw that there was a picture of there was a guy, it was a Call of Duty screenshot. His hand had way too many fingers. It was like 7 fingers on his hand. We don't need none of that. We need to get rid of that. That's AI slop.
though it's always going to persist. It's always going to be there. You can't just completely eliminate it 100%. And honestly, to these US politicians, that's not good enough. And yet, GTA Online also did a similar thing. GTA Online now features AI voice chat moderation. And yes, this is the use of AI technology. A lot of these companies are relying on this front because they don't want to invest that much money into this stuff. And AI is just a much cheaper answer to this type of
this just like blows my mind. Who cares? It's an M-rated game. Who needs... The only thing you need voice moderation for are people who are spamming. But also, again, you can mute you can block them.
Moderation. Now, getting back to this ADL report, normalized harassment and all of that, to hate frame, the reality we find in ADL's 5th annual survey of this and online multiplayer games, and this coupled with new trends and exposure to that type of extremism in online multiplayer games, including potential evidence of recruitment to those, extremism, create an urgent challenge for the future of online multiplayer games that must be addressed by all stakeholders, from industry and government to civil society and the broader public.
How about we not? How about we not with that? How about we just leave that alone, just leave it be? Because that's gonna get out of control real fast. They're gonna just start banning people from. You're gonna be required to use an account for multiple games, is what's gonna happen. And if you get banned, you will be banned from multiple games instead of just one. That's exactly what's gonna happen, and that's a bunch of crap, because what if one game sucks at moderation and then you just get banned from like 12 games, or get completely banned from a service that you're using? Because like you say something bad on Call of Duty, you end up getting banned from Steam. Can't play any of your games then.
And yes, this report obviously says the majority of young people experience harassment in online multiplayer games. Apparently,
duh. Okay. I mean, if they're rated like E for everyone, sure. But we're talking like Call of Duty and stuff here, like shooter games. To be fair, Fortnite I think should be M rated, because got guns, you're shooting each other. That's violence. Should be M rated. People die.
Up from 2022, 29 to 37% identified it. Women in Black or African American gamers were the most harassed because of their identity for the first time since 2019. Harassment of adults in online multiplayer games decreased for the first time in 5 years. Despite a decrease in overall exposure, many players who are exposed to this type of, behavior see it regularly. Adults and teens are spending less money on games due to harassment they face, and that feels...
I think it's because... everything's an advertisement. All the games are garbage. All the best games are the old games, and it's hard to track people playing the old games. I know a lot of parents that are just like, I'm not getting my kid the new Xbox. Why would I get them? All the games are expensive. A bunch of microtransactions. I'll just get them an Xbox 360. Get them a bunch of Xbox 360 games. Or the Xbox One. Why not? They'll be playing old games. They won't know the difference.
Like a reach. I don't know how you correlate online spending to that type of content or that type of behavior in these online lobbies.
They can't. They're just pulling it out of their ass.
20% of gamers, adult and teens, are spending less money in online games because of the behavior that they face. And as you go...
hate and harassment from the game developers, maybe.
Go through this report, it goes through all the different groups that apparently face this type of behavior, this type of hate, harassment, and such. And then it goes on to mention...
who are these people taking these surveys? I think it's gays. I think these people are gay. I think all the people who take surveys like this are gay. And that's why they always have these gay-ass results.
Again, the legislative efforts. Pressure for the industry to act on issues related to this has continued to mount, however. Following the release of ADL's online game survey in December of 2022, we saw a growing concern about game company accountability in Congress. Representative Lori Trahan of Massachusetts, alongside a coalition of congressional legislators, wrote to 14 major game companies about their efforts to address these types of behaviors in online games, and that's why we are seeing those efforts in like GTA Online and Call of Duty with the AI stuff. Rep. Trahan's oversight efforts occurred alongside efforts by Senator Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire to hold the game company Valve accountable for its role in allowing all of this to spread on its Steam online game store service. And then they also go on to mention that later that month, Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois further pressed 7 video game companies on their efforts to address extremism, as well as urging Attorney General Merlin, whatever his name is, Garland, and U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas to pay attention to threats in these spaces. And then finally, in June, Rep. Trahan offered an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, which calls for a commission to study connections between online multiplayer games and that. These steps were noteworthy, even though it was not adopted, and it probably shouldn't be adopted. And again, I just have very mixed thoughts about possible regulation of the video game industry through these means, because there isn't enough examples that are happening here. They're just using a blanket definition of hate and harassment, something that has been persistent. Yes, it's just something that happens online, and I don't know what the answer is to any of that. And I think the problem is these US politicians want to see further censorship of these platforms and these online communities to a point in which I'm not sure where the point is going to end. You know, there's always going to be an effort or a call to have these platforms do more and more. And look, I'm not trying to dismiss that there isn't issues. There are issues. The answers that are just being given, it just doesn't seem to be enough to these US politicians and many of these media.
It's never enough. It'll never be enough. If you let them win, then they'll just go after the next thing. They'll go harder.
Outlets or organizations like the ADL. And yeah, I do take issue with the mythology of this report, which is like 2,000 individuals, and here they have this, the ADL report, in-game impacts on young people, and here in which they say Valorant. I stopped playing the game entirely because of behavior that other players are giving to them, 9%. I'm playing the game less than I used to, 25%. It didn't affect my play behavior, 35%. I'm playing the game more than I used to, 14%, and you can see all of the other games listed here. But I don't find the correlation between behavior and people not playing a game. I think there's other factors that are being ignored because there's a narrative that is being pushed here by the ADL.
True.
And ultimately, the ADL's response and their recommendation, I guess, to change the video...
Go ahead and try and regulate games like that. Go ahead and try it. You know what's going to happen. There's going to be games everywhere, and you won't be able to stop it. And it's going to get worse. Every time with this. Every time. It just pushes the people who are making the bad games into the underground. At least we can see who they are that are making the bad games. Sure. They're profiting a little bit. Why not? They're not that bad. But if we just let it go fringe and let it go out of control just on random websites on the internet, then it's not going to be good.
Video game industry and go after Steam is that societal stakeholders must demonstrate their commitment disrupting the intergenerational norms around hate and harassment on online multiplayer games. Even though we are seeing those efforts, they're just being downplayed by the ADL. This will require substantial investment and active steps from policymakers, tech companies, educators, and families. While government is necessarily focused on the dangers posed by social media and AI, they must also dedicate attention to the immediate threats pervasive in online gaming environments. Some companies in the game industry are taking incremental steps to make their games safer. However, all major game companies should be driving efforts to combat the normalization of hate in their gaming platforms, as well as the gaming industry at large. Academia and civil society must also support efforts to decrease this type of behavior in online multiplayer games by conducting research and disseminating their findings on the threat of this type of behavior, and in particular potential recruitment poses in these spaces. Caretakers and educators, whether they were raised as gamers or not, must guide young gamers on best practices for safety in online multiplayer spaces and prioritize their safety of their children and students by implementing parental controls. In the aftermath of, well, what happened in October 7th last year by Hamas and Israel and the ensuing war, and with the upcoming 2024, well, now past us, and the threat of all of this type of stuff, it will become only more dire globally. This is especially true for online gaming spaces. ADL recommends different stakeholder groups take the following steps to play an active role in promoting online safety, and they say prioritize transparency legislation in digital spaces that include online multiplayer games. States are beginning to introduce, and some are successfully passing, legislation to promote transparency about their content policies and enforcement on major social media platforms. But again, how far does this legislation go? And this, what they're saying here is just very broad. They just want legislation. And I take considerable issue with that. There isn't specifics really given about how they want to change the video game industry to be, I guess, safer. It's just a broad, response here. Game-specific transparency laws will ensure that users and the public can better understand how gaming companies are enforcing their policies and promoting user safety. They want to enhance access to justice for victims of online abuse, establish a gaming task force, and resource research efforts. And then for companies, again, they want them to be taking this a lot more seriously. Anyway, as I said throughout this video, creating safer online communities, the answers to that, we are seeing that from a number of companies. But how far moderation needs to go is something that you're just not getting that clear answer from many of these, reports from the ADL and these US senators, because they all have narratives. And they do want to point out the video game industry is problematic. They're not caring. Because yes, video games is the easiest scapegoat, and they will continue to be just that. So what this comes down to is the extent that the ADL and the US government wishes to prevent toxicity and other problematic behavior. And the issue is there never seems to be an endpoint. Say what you will though, but the video game industry in general has already gone through immense change in regards to what is and isn't allowed in the last decade or so. People will talk about MW2 lobbies in 2009, but rarely mention the insane custom emblems people would make in Black Ops. Nowadays, no company would dare let players have that level of freedom. If anything, we've seen numerous game companies go overboard with overzealous in-game chat moderation, resulting in some truly bizarre automated consequences. I've had my own run-ins with companies pushing for censorship. An article a couple of years ago contacted my advertisers and even the companies I was criticizing because they, CNET's Ian Sure, didn't like the tone of my videos. Yes, really. All of these organizations and groups have narratives, and the latest attack on Steam is a growing one that probably isn't going anywhere. Bad actors will forever exist, no matter the changes Valve potentially makes in the future. The worry though also is another potential tragedy in the future being weaponized against the platform, resulting in changes that could limit free speech freedoms, because I would guess moderation will never be enough, and the easier way out is just stripping user features like chat boards and even user reviews. That is the concern I have, and definitely something still in my mind with really any online platform that lets users converse today. But anyway, what do you make of this potential censorship campaign against Valve? Do you think more needs to be done in terms of online toxicity? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.
Oh, yeah, agreed, 100%. I don't like censorship because they always go too far. You can always just hide the stuff that you don't like, and if it's too bad, then obviously get rid of the really, really bad stuff. But at a certain level, you just can't. And if you start getting rid of stuff that people like, or stuff that like is just somewhat problematic, then it's just they're just gonna find other spaces where you won't be able to find it, and it's gonna get worse, and it's gonna get shoved into the underground. And let's not have that. I'd rather be able to see all of the bad actors. I'm gonna give that a like. I'm not subscribed to this guy. I'm gonna give him. I am subscribed, but just on my other channel, not my channel, my other account.